Okay, today we talk about chapter 14 of Cybernetics. This one's titled That Winning Feeling, and it's about sort of the idea of in the moment, how do you think? In the moment, how do you feel? In the moment leading up to a problem, a situation, a meeting, whatever it is, what is your approach? What do you do? Do you think about what could go wrong? Or do you think about what could go right? Because if you're thinking about what could go wrong, then you have already made an excuse to not succeed. And you've already made an excuse to fail. You already built up something in your head that's going to hold you back, that's going to prevent you from giving it all you can give. And in fact, in this world, all we can do is give all we can give. But so few times are we able to actually put ourselves out there. So few times are we able to go headlong into a problem without fear. And that's what this chapter is attempting to tackle, and I think does a very good job of it. Chapter 14, How to Get That Winning Feeling. Your automatic creative mechanism is teleological. That is, it operates in terms of goals and end results. Once you give it a definite goal to achieve, you can depend upon its automatic guidance system to take you to that goal much better than you ever could by conscious thought. You supply the goal by thinking in terms of end results. Your automatic mechanism then supplies the means whereby, if your muscles need to perform some motion to bring about that end result, your automatic mechanism will guide them much more accurately and delicately than you could by taking thought. If you need ideas, your automatic mechanism will supply them. So it's important to understand that he's not talking about understanding the means of how something's going to happen. Understand what steps you're going to take. Just approaching a problem with a confidence, with an idea that, you know what, I can do this. You know what, if I put my mind to it, it will happen. I don't know how yet, but I just know deep in my heart that I'm capable of doing this thing. And that's all you need to carry into a problem. That's all you need to carry into a situation. If you carry that and you don't give in to that negative voice, then you're so much more likely to just face the world and face it with a smile and face it with your rational capabilities. Because, what do we do when we become negative? What do we do when we become fearful and anxious? It's usually that we shut down. We're not able to approach things logically. We're thinking emotionally. We're thinking from the places of our brain that aren't going to benefit us in this moment. Whereas if we just calm ourselves down, usually we can make a better decision. Think in terms of possibilities. But to accomplish this, you must supply the goal. And to supply a goal capable of activating your creative mechanism, you must think of the end result in terms of a present possibility. The possibility of a goal must be seen clearly that it becomes real to your brain and nervous system. So real, in fact, the same feelings are evoked as would be present if the goal were already achieved. This is not so difficult nor so mystical as it may first appear. You and I do it every day of our lives. What, for example, is worry about possible unfavorable future results accompanied by feelings of anxiety, inadequacy, or perhaps humiliation? So I'm going to skip the rest of this chapter because I think I'm going to say what he's saying, and I think it's going to be redundant, but what he is saying is that imagining the good possibility is just a change in polarity of what we already do. That so many of us in our head, once a problem arises, we immediately think about the worst case scenario and we immediately think about what could go wrong. And, how much of our worrying is worrying for worrying? And I know that sounded very dumb, but there's a point of genius in there that Seneca coined way better than I could when he said, we suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality. We don't understand that most of the problems we face are imaginary. We build things up in our heads to be far worse than they could ever be. But what would our lives be like if we didn't have this nagging impulse? If we didn't have this need to constantly self-sabotage, this need to constantly, think and dwell and worry about things that aren't even real? What if we could put that to something positive? What if this habit was aspirational instead of detrimental? And essentially what he tells you to do is that imagine yourself having already done it. Imagine yourself having already been capable of it, and think from that place. Make it so real that it feels like it has already happened. Make it so real that it has already occurred, and that the results of what's going to happen do not matter because you have already experienced it, and it's fine. It's great. It's cool. Don't worry about the end result. Stop worrying about the end result. Worry about how you're feeling. Worry about the journey. Worry about if you enjoy the process that you're undertaking. Your nervous system can't tell real failure from imagined failure. Thus, if we dwell, thus if we dwell, I love how I can't say dwell. Thus, if we dwell upon failure and continually picture failure to ourselves in such vivid detail that it becomes real, to our nervous system we will experience that feeling that go with failure. On the other hand, if we keep our positive goal in mind and picture ourselves so vividly as to make it real and think of it in terms of an accomplished fact, we will also experience winning feelings, self-confidence, courage, and faith that the outcome will be desirable. We cannot consciously peek into our creative mechanism and see whether it is geared for success or failure, but we can determine its presence set by our feelings. When it is set for success, we experience that winning feeling. Setting your machinery for success. And if there is one simple secret to the operation of your unconscious creative mechanism, it is this. Call up, capture, evoke the feeling of success. When you feel successful and self-confident, you will act successfully. When the feeling is strong, you can literally do no wrong. The winning feeling itself does not cause you to operate successfully, but it is more in the nature of a sign or a symptom that we are geared for success. It is more like a thermometer which does not cause the heat in the room, but measures it. However, we can use the thermometer in a very practical way. Remember, when you experience that winning feeling, your internal machinery is set for success. Too much effort is consciously bring about, I don't like how this is worded, about spontaneity is likely to destroy spontaneous action. It is much easier and more effective to simply define your goal or end result, picture it to yourself clearly and vividly, and simply capture the feeling you would experience if the desirable goal were already accomplished fact. Okay, so what he's saying is, if you think of the means on how to get the ends, then you limit the means. But if you're working with infinite possibilities and you're just imagining the end, then you allow infinite possibilities to actualize. You allow your imagination and your creativity to take hold. But when you limit your imagination and creativity, then you limit its power. And think about it this way, like, if you do what everyone else is doing, then you're going to get the same results. And it's very rare where people get exponential growth. It's very rare where people have scenarios that just defy logic. But that's the power that Dr. Maxwell Maltz is talking about right now. He's talking about creativity. He's talking about imagination. He's talking about inventions or creations that have defied logic and that have stunned humanity and changed the way we think about certain subjects. You know, it could be a work of art like the Mona Lisa. It could be the Gothic churches. It could be, you know, the printing press, or, you know, Edison making the light bulb workable, or Einstein redefining the way that we see reality through his physics, or, you know, Tesla just being years and years and years ahead of every other scientist alive at the time. And we all have some form of this creativity. We all have some form of this idea and this possibility inside of us, but we don't listen to our voice. We don't allow our mind to work towards an end. We don't give it a possibility that we want, and we don't allow it to wander and to hope and to eventually find that solution. This may be tough, but it can be licked. That's a weird way to say it. This was definitely an old saying, because it just feels so weird to say. There is truly magic in the winning feeling. It can seemingly cancel out obstacles and possibilities. It can use errors and mistakes to accomplish success. J.C. Penney tells how he heard his father say on his deathbed, "I know Jim will make it." From that time onward, Penney felt that he would succeed. Somehow, although he had no tangible assets, no money, no education, the chain of J.C. Penney stores was built upon many impossible circumstances and discouraging moments. Whenever Penney would get discouraged, however, he would remember that prediction of his father, and he would feel that somehow he could whip the problem facing him. So, again, it's very important that in our moments of insecurity, in our moments of anxiety, in our moments of fear, we neglect those feelings, because your feelings will multiply. Your ideas, what you focus on, will create the things you see around you. As Robert Anton Wilson says, what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. And essentially what this is saying is that you have a certain way that you bias the world. And the way you bias the world, you will observe the world. So think about somebody with a certain ideology, with a certain way of seeing things. If they're a pessimist, you know, they stub their toe and the entire world is out to get them and everything sucks. Where an optimist stubs their toe and they say, you know what, at least I have a good laugh from that. And the way that we approach things and the way that we internalize things are very much determinant of how we respond to them, determinant of how we move forward. So understand this idea and understand how important it is to constantly refocus yourself, and understand why you're doing this thing. What are you hoping to gain? How sweet is that victory when you reach the top of the mountain going to feel because you experienced all this pain, frustration, and heartbreak? Return yourself to that feeling. Return yourself to the idea that you can already do it and that it's already here. How your brain records success and failure. Such experts in the field of brain psychology as Dr. C. Eccles and Sir Charles Sherrington tell us how the human cortex is composed of some 10 billion neurons, each with numerous axons, parentheses, feelers or extensive wires, which form synapses, parentheses, electrical connections between the neurons. We think, remember, or imagine these neurons discharge an electrical current which can be measured. When we learn something or experience something, a pattern of neurons forming a chain or tattooing of a pattern is set up in the brain tissue. This pattern is not the nature of physical groove or track, but more in the nature of an electric track, the arrangement and the electrical connections between various neurons, between somewhat similar to a magnetic pattern recorded on a tape. The same neuron must thus be a part of any number of separate and distinct patterns, making the human brain capacity to learn and remember almost limitless. These patterns, or engrams, are stored away in brain tissue for future use and are reactivated or replayed whenever we remember a past experience. Dr. Eccles says the profusion of interconnections among the cells of gray matter is beyond all imagination. It is ultimately so comprehensive that the whole cortex can be thought of as one great unit of integrated activity. If now we persist in regarding the brain as machine, then we must say that it is by far the most complicated machine in existence. We are tempted to say that it is infinitely more complicated than the most complex man-made machines, the electrical computers. In short, science confirms that there is a tattooing or action pattern of engrams in your brain for every successful action you have ever performed in the past. And if you can somehow furnish the spark to bring that action pattern into life or replay it, it will execute itself, and all you have to do is swing the clubs and let nature take its course. Okay. So that was a lot just to say that when you experience success, you fire certain parts of your brain that get you in the right kind of mood. Think about how all these things could be going wrong, but one thing goes right, and then you ride that trend to the end. That is essentially what he's saying, is that there's this part of your brain that is open to receiving good things. And when you find one little facet of success, then you have found all of it. Gradualness. Why can't I say this word? Gradualness is the secret. Weightlifters start with weights they can lift and gradually increase the weight over a period of time. Good fight managers start a new boxer off with easy opponents and gradually pit him against more experienced fighters. We can apply the same general principle in almost any field of endeavor. The principle is merely to start with an opponent over which you can succeed and gradually take on more and more difficult tasks. Pavlov on his deathbed. That's the guy that trained his dog with treats, and basically he gave him a indication that he was going to give him a treat, and the dog would just obey. That simply showing that if you modify behavior enough, it just becomes instinctual. Pavlov on his deathbed was asked to give one last bit of advice to his students on how to succeed. His answer was passion and gradualness. Even in those areas where we have already developed a high degree of skill, and it sometimes helps to drop back, lower our sights a bit, and practice with a feeling of ease. This is especially true when one reaches a sticking point. In progress, where effort for additional progress is unavailing, continually straining to go beyond the sticking point is likely to develop undesirable feeling habits of strain, difficulty, effort. Under such conditions, weightlifters reduce the amount of weight on the bar and practice easy lifting for a while. A boxer who shows signs of going stale is pitted against a number of easier opponents. Albert Tangora, for many years the world champion speed typist, used to practice typing slow at half normal speed whenever he reached a plateau, where a further increase in speed seemed impossible. I know a prominent salesman who uses the same principle to get himself out of sales slumps. He stops trying to make sales, stops trying to sell tough customers, and concentrates on making small sales to customers he has come to know as pushovers. Okay, so what he's saying here is very important. It's that don't go looking for the home run if you feel like you're in a slump. Don't force yourself to work harder and harder and harder to get that same result that you've been getting. If it feels off, take a step back. Take an easy victory and build from there. It's always easier to build from a lesser success than it is to achieve greatness and then keep pushing and then keep going and then keep looking for that next hit of dopamine. So, if you feel yourself stuck, if you feel yourself in some sort of a rut, then maybe just start with your chores. Maybe start with cleaning your room. Maybe start with doing the dishes, doing your laundry. Like whatever it is that you can get knocked off that checklist of things you need to do, it's worth doing, because then it means that you can tackle the larger problems. Then it means you could start snowballing and going to the bigger things that are bothering you right now. How to play back your own built-in success patterns. Everyone has at some time or another been successful in the past. It does not have to have been a big success. It might have been something as unimportant as standing up to the school bully and beating him, winning a race in grammar school, winning the sack race at the office picnic, winning out. Okay, these are just going to keep going. What you succeed in is not so important as the feeling of success which attended it. All that is needed is some experience where you succeeded in doing what you wanted to do and achieving what you set out to achieve, and something that brought you some feeling of satisfaction. Go back in memory and relive those successful experiences. In your imagination, revive the entire picture in as much detail as you can in your mind's eye. See not only speech, business deal, golf tournament, or whatever that accompanied your success. What sounds were there? What about your environment? What else was happening around you at the time? What objects were present? What time of the year was it? Were you cold or hot? And in some form, the more detailed you can make it, the better. If you can remember in sufficient detail just what happened when you were successful at some time in the past, you'll find yourself feeling just as you felt then. Try particularly remembering your feelings at the time. If you can remember your feelings from the past, they will be reactivated in the present. You will find yourself feeling self-confident, because self-confidence is built upon memories of past success. Now, after arousing this general feeling of success, give your thoughts to the important sale, conference, speech, business deal, golf tournament, or whatever that you wish to succeed in the now. Use your creative imagination to picture yourself just as you would act and just how you would feel if you had already succeeded. So what he's saying is use your experience. Use the good times. Remember the good times. Remember them in every detail and try to think about every facet of them, and use that same sort of approach to a problem that you're dealing with now. And this is such great advice, because think it's a lot easier to draw on past experience than it is to capture what it would feel like if you had something that you've never experienced. And I think this is one of the greatest ideas that I've stumbled across recently. It's something that I learned through reality transurfing as well, that if you bring back the past feelings of happiness and the past successes, then you could use that same sort of mindset, that same sort of approach to the things that you're dealing with right now, and you could deal with them in a much better way. Positive and constructive worry. Mentally begin to play with the idea of complete and inevitable success. Don't force yourself to an attempt to coerce your mind. Don't try to use effort or willpower to bring about the desired conviction. Just do what you do when you worry. Only worry about the positive goal and a desirable outcome rather than a negative goal and an undesirable outcome. How to cultivate faith and courage. Faith and courage are developed in exactly the same way, only your goals are different. If you're going to spend time in worry, why not worry constructively? Begin by outlining and defining to yourself the most desirable possible outcome. Begin with your suppose. Suppose the best possible outcome did actually come true. Next, remind yourself that after all this could happen. Not that it will happen at this stage, but only that it could. Remind yourself that after all, such a good and desirable outcome is possible. Don't take counsel of your fears. And this is the idea of don't give in to your fears. Don't give in to the idea that things are going to go wrong. I know it sounds like a lot, but once you have one idea of doubt, it's going to multiply in the next. So always push back. Always push back when you have these sorts of thoughts that you know aren't necessarily correct, that you know are just that voice in your back of the back of your head telling you not to do something, telling you that you can't do something. Knowing this, you are free to accept or reject these negative failure feelings, to obey them and take counsel of them, or to ignore their advice and go ahead. Moreover, you are in a position to use them for your own benefit. I think that summarizes what he was saying pretty well. Accept negative feelings is a challenge. If we react to negative feelings aggressively and positively, they become challenges, which will automatically arouse more power and more ability within us. The idea of difficulty, threat, menace arouses additional strength within us if we react to it aggressively rather than passively. So think of this idea. I have to face this hard problem. I have to do this challenge. I have to do something that I don't think I can do, and I'm going to rise to the occasion. Think about talking to yourself in that way instead of, this thing's so hard, I don't know if I can do it. And it's simply just reacting and facing the challenge with a smile instead of folding and falling back and retreating into yourself. React aggressively to your own negative advice. Everyone has known individuals who can be discouraged and defeated by the advice from others that you can't do it. On the other hand, there are people who rise to the occasion and become more determined than ever to succeed when given the same advice. An associate of Henry J. Kaiser says, if you don't want Henry to do a thing, you had better not make the mistake of telling him it can't be done or that he can't do it, for he will then do it or bust. It is not only possible but entirely practicable. Why is it not practical? Anyway, to react in the same aggressive, positive manner to the negative advice of our own feelings as we can and should when the negative advice comes from others. Overcome evil with good. Feelings cannot be directly controlled by willpower. They cannot be voluntarily made to order or turned on and off like a faucet. If they cannot be commanded, however, they can be wooed. If they cannot be controlled by a direct act of will, then they can be controlled indirectly. Okay, so I don't necessarily know exactly what he's going to say, but I know what he's going to say for these next two parts of it, so I'm going to just use a very simple example to illustrate it instead of go into detail, because I think the detail, if you want to go back and read this book, is obviously it's going to be beneficial, but this is what's helped me the most, and this is what has allowed me to overcome all of my negative thoughts, all of my doubts, all the things that used to bother me. And it simply is, if I have a negative thought and I keep thinking about it, it's going to get worse. So if I don't want to think a negative thing, then I have to replace it with something else. There's people that meditate to get rid of their thoughts. That's one thing. But if you don't meditate, if you don't want to spend years getting good at meditating and getting years good at mindfulness and that sort of stuff, then all I suggest you do is replace it with a different thought. And that seems so weird and so just nonsensical, but I need you to understand this. Try not to think about a $100 bill. You just did. So in effort, when you try not to think about something, you think about it more. And what I need you to understand is you can't ever think your way out of thinking. You can only change your thought pattern. You can only change what you are thinking about. So if you're in a very negative state, if you're in a very negative thought loop, to get yourself out of this negative thought loop, the best exercise that I have found is simply expressing gratitude, is simply thinking about the things in your life that you've been blessed with and understanding, I have this, I have that. And that's immediately going to switch you to a more positive frame of mind. It might not make you feel great. It might not allow you to overcome the problem that you're in right now, but at least you're not thinking negatively. The choice is up to you. Within you is a vast mental storehouse of past experiences and feelings, both failures and success. Like inactive recordings or tape, these experiences and feelings are recorded on the neutral engrams of your gray matter. There are recordings of stories with happy endings and recordings of stories with unhappy endings. One is as true as the other. One is as real as the other. The choice is up to you as to what you select to play back. So the feelings you bring into the present are the things that you focus on, the things that you actively want to remember, and the things that you want to bring with you. So if you feel yourself bringing negative experiences, then think about the good times. Try to remember the times where you're successful. Try to remember the times where everything was going according to plan. And bring that feeling into the present. Old recordings can be changed. Another interesting finding is that The more a given engram is activated or replayed, the more potent it becomes. Eccles and Sherrigan tell us that the permanence of engrams is derived from synaptic efficacy, the efficiency and ease of connections between the individual neurons that make up the chain, and further, that synaptic efficiency improves with use and diminishes with disuse. Here again, we have good scientific ground for forgetting and ignoring those unhappy experiences from the past and concentrating upon the happy and pleasant. By doing so, we strengthen those engrams having to do with success and happiness, and weaken those having to do with failure and unhappiness. These concepts have developed not from a wild speculation, a weird mumbo-jumbo about mentally constructed straw men such as the id or the superego and the like, but from the sound scientific research into brain physiology. Interesting, he doesn't support Freud. They are based on observable facts and phenomena, not fanciful theories. They go a long way towards restoring the dignity of man as a responsible child of God, able to cope with his past and plan his future, as opposed to the image of man as helpless victim of his past experience. The new concept does carry responsibility, however. No longer can you derive sickly comfort from blaming your parents, society, your early experiences, or the injustices of others for your present troubles. These things may and should help you understand how you got where you are. Blaming them or even yourself for the past mistakes, however, will not solve your problem or improve your present or your future. There is no merit in blaming yourself. The past explains how you got here, but where you go from here is your responsibility. The choice is yours. Like a broken phonograph, you can keep on playing the same old broken record of the past, reliving past injustices, pitying yourself for past mistakes, all which reactivates failure patterns and failure feelings, which color your present and your future. Or if you choose, you can put on a new record and reactivate success patterns and that winning feeling, which help you do better in the present and promise a more enjoyable future. When your phonograph is playing music you don't like, you do not try to force it to do better, you do not use effort or willpower, you do not bang the phonograph around, you do not try to change the music itself, you merely change the record being played and the music takes care of itself. Use the same technique on the music that come out of your own internal machine. Do not pit your will directly against the music. As long as the same mental imagery, the cause, occupies your attention, no amount of effort will change the music, parentheses the result. Instead, try putting on a new record. Change your mental imagery and the feelings will take care of themselves. Okay. So I am not going to go into too much depth because I think this chapter did a very good job. I'm just going to leave you with a few thoughts. So the most important part of this chapter is understanding that the way we frame things is the way that we can move forward. If you frame things in the possible side of things, if you frame things in I can do this, you're that much more likely. If you frame things in the idea that you can't do this, it's not going to happen probably. And how do we get over our dwelling thoughts of negativity? How do we get over these ideas that we can't do something? Well, it's as simple as replacing those negative thoughts with more positive ones. Finding the experiences that we've had of success, making them as real as possible, remembering as much detail, feeling as if we are already there, and bringing that to the present, bringing that to the present scenario, and thinking about the end goal in that same sense of hope, that same sense of feeling. And it's the same thing with the experiences that haunt us. We can dwell on things that we don't like, we can dwell on things that have torn us down, but it really serves us no good to do that. In fact, we want to dwell on the memories that make us happy, the memories that build us up, the memories that have defined us in a positive aspect, and play those in our head as much as possible. Bring those to reality as much as possible. Bring those to the surface of the unconscious as much as you possibly can. And yeah, I think this was a really, really good chapter. We have one more chapter in this book, I think, and then we are done with Cybernetics. But it's been very fun going through this book with you guys, and it was a very fun video today. So with that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for all the support. It's been crazy. Peace out. I will catch you in the next one.